Hello, I'm Laven. I'm a composer and sound designer. Laven Music and Sound. And we're going to talk a little bit about how you can communicate with a composer or sound designer to get your game sounding the way you want it to. So I don't know if it's actually intimidating to talk to someone who does music. I guessed it might be, because if you listen to people talk about music, it's probably a lot of words you don't recognize. Good news is you don't even know any of that, because it's our job to take your plain English and translate it into music. So, quick overview. We'll talk about figuring out how your game should sound in the first place, how you want it to sound. We'll talk about describing your game's world and audio needs and how you can get an idea of that before you're hunting for a composer, because it's not a very good idea to go to a composer and say, I don't know, figure it out. You're not going to get what you want that way. We'll talk about building a deliverables list. I have an example of this. This is the way that you're going to want to submit your requests once you've found a composer and chosen your composer. This is the spreadsheet you're going to want to give them so that they can stay organized and give you what you need. We'll talk a little bit about where you might be able to find a composer or sound designer, right here, and how to give constructive feedback, because it's kind of rare that the first draft that you get is going to be what you want. And in order to get that closer to what you want, there's ways to go about that and ways not to go about that. So we'll talk about that. I'm not going to talk for too long. We'll give like a quick overview, and I'll leave lots of time for questions, and we could do a little bit. I have a little bit of an interactive thing planned that we can see how that goes. See if people are interested in doing that. So, let's see. So, figuring out how your game should sound. There are a lot of factors that go into this, and if you've spent all of this time making a game, you've probably thought a lot about all of these things. You have to consider your story and your gameplay and your mood. A game like Tetris is going to have very, very different music from a game like Assassin's Creed. So, you want to think about, is there a narrative? Are there characters in your story? Is there an emotional arc to this story? What are your characters? What are their personalities? What does the narrative do? What is the genre of both your story and your gameplay? If you're setting your game in like a Lord of the Rings style elvish world, it's going to sound a fair bit different than a game set in space, most likely. So you want to think about these things. And again, you want to think about your gameplay. A combat game is going to sound really, really different from a card game. So you also want to think about your setting. Is this in the real world or the fictional world? Whether your game is based in the real world or not, you're going to want to make sure if you set your game in a real world place, you're going to want to be respectful to that culture and that area and those people. And you're not going to want to, if you set your game in Japan, you're not going to want to have Chinese music. It's not going to make sense. So you're going to want to consider the regional instruments and music of that area. You're going to want to consider whether you're in natural or constructed places. This makes a difference because if you're on a spaceship, you're probably going to want your music to have a certain amount of artificiality. You're probably not going to want just a straight orchestra, like a full orchestra, and you're probably not going to want to have too many acoustic instruments. You're going to want that feeling of being in space in that sterile environment. You don't need to worry about how to translate that into music. You just need to think about what your environment is. What materials are present there, because if you're in a fantasy realm, the materials that are available are going to determine the types of instruments that your fantasy characters are building. And the time period. You're probably not going to put electric guitars in the medieval game, unless that's the aesthetic you're going for. Do your research. Once you have this sort of figured out, go and listen to the music of other games in your genre. If you're building a Lord of the Rings style game, go listen to the Lord of the Rings online score. Listen to the Dota score. Listen to things like that are in your realm. Listen to the regional music of the area that your game is set in, if you're setting it in a real life place. Think about things that you like and don't like about what you're hearing, and write that down. Describing your game's world and audio needs. So now that you have a sense of what you want, you need to be able to communicate that to your composer and sound designer. So you're going to want to practice reducing your game's description to an elevator pitch. 1 to 2 sentences, some of the important details about what makes your game unique. You've probably already done this, because if you're pitching this to publishers or you're trying to get people to play it, you probably, hopefully, have already reduced it down to a sentence or 2. be prepared to describe different parts of the game. Places, characters, moods, modes. Again, we're talking about how Tetris is going to sound very different from Splatoon, which is going to sound different from Civilization, because they're different play styles. And you're going to want to consider your audio budget. Determine the bare minimum you can scrape by on, and then build all the way up to your best case scenario. Music is expensive. Sound design is expensive because it takes a very long time to learn how to do it and do it well, and it takes a lot of time to actually create music and sound. So this is something you want to think about early on. How much money are you going to allocate to audio, and what can you realistically get from that budget? So you're going to want to figure out the bare minimum you could live with for audio, and then go all the way up to your best case scenario, because you never know. Building a deliverables list. This is very important, and this is also pretty nuanced as well. So with a deliverables list, there's some basic things that you're going to want to let us know. You're going to want to let us know the type of track or sound. Is this a bed? Is it an ambience? Is it something that goes on and loops? Or is it a stinger that happens when you hit something? Is it a sound that happens when you're low on health? Is it a sound that happens at the very end of the game when you've either won or lost? You're going to want to indicate what type of sound it is, how long it should be. Is it a quick 1 second thing? Is it a 2-minute loop? Does it loop or not? What is the priority of this sound? Is this something that is absolutely essential that you can't do without, or is it something that would just kind of be nice to have? You're going to want to order your sounds in priority. The due date, the date that you need this sound done. A name for it. You're going to want to have a name for it. That's going to help you figure out where you want things to go. So if you give your composer or sound designer a naming convention, you're going to be doing them a favor, you're going to be doing you a favor. Describe it and give us some notes about it. Remind us what this sound is, tell us what it should sound like. The example I have here is from the deliverables list that I received for Brass, the audio drama, by Battleground Productions. So you can see here, they actually gave me which episode it was and the page number of the script, because I had the scripts to all of these audio dramas. It's a little bit different. The type of music that it was, the characters involved, because I had written character themes for every character in the show, so I could incorporate their themes into the music that we were working on here. Where it took place, so I could get a sense of the ambience and the mood there. How long it should be, the descriptor, whether or not it was diegetic. Diegetic meaning, is it coming from a source in the room? Sometimes you'll watch a movie, you'll see a film or a game, and the music, you'll hear music coming from a radio, right? That's called diegetic. It comes from a source within the room, within the scene. And that can shift from diegetic to non-diegetic and back again. Sometimes you'll notice they'll carry that into a new scene, they'll keep that song going. So that's what that fancy word means. They gave me a priority. 1 being most important, 4 being least important. They gave me a due date, and they gave me some general notes about it to let me know what was going on. Where can you find a composer for sound design? So, a lot of people have trouble with this, which amazes me in part because there's a bazillion of us out there. It's a very competitive field. Probably the best thing to do is to start going to some local events, or go to bigger events like GDC, E3, wherever you want to go. To meet people in person. It's nice to meet people in person, see if you vibe with them, see if they're okay, or if they're going to be really weird, you're not well working with them. Ask around, talk to your friends, see who they've worked with, see who they've had good experiences with, see who they've had bad experiences with. If that fails, you can look on Facebook. There's a bunch of Facebook pages. There's indie game developers, gaming industry talent, indie game music, SFX, and voice artists. So you can just go there and throw a post and say, I'm looking for a composer or sound designer. And there are also forums that you can go on. There's TakeSource and there's IGDA and other forums. Constructive feedback. Don't use musical terms. Just don't do it. Just don't. Unless you know exactly what you're talking about, don't use a musical term. Let me tell you a little bit of a story. So, I actually asked a lot of different composers and audio people for stories that I could tell you guys to illustrate really good examples of communication and really bad examples of communication, and I didn't get as many as I had hoped for. But the thing that inspired me to give this talk in the first place is that I was visiting my grad school, Vermont College of Fine Arts, and my advisor, Rabid, was giving a presentation about sort of the other end of this, receiving communication from a client and giving them what they want. And he talked about a time that a client told him the music he had written was too dissonant. Does anyone know what dissonant means? Dissonant means really clashy and uncomfortable, lots of minor seconds and tritones, and like just not pleasant to listen to. So he came back and told him the music was too dissonant, and he was really confused about that because it was in a major key and it was pretty consonant. So he went back and he made it as more consonant meaning pleasant sounding, nice to listen to. And the client was like, no, that's not what I want, it's still too dissonant. And he ultimately ended up realizing that what the client meant was that they wanted it dissonant, and they didn't know how to communicate that. So, don't use musical terms unless you're certain that's what you mean. Use emotional descriptors. Talk about how you want the scene to make you feel. Talk about how you want this music to make you feel, because that's what music does. It makes you feel. That's the point of putting it in your game, is to help enhance the story and the mood that you're going for. If you're doing a fast-paced puzzle game like Tetris, you don't have a story or a narrative to get people feeling, to keep people invested. You have the gameplay, and you have the music. So use emotional descriptors. Oh, this doesn't sound sad enough yet, or it's too sad, I want it to be a little more joyful, or the character should feel like this, the player should feel like that. Use those kinds of words. You can also use words that are not emotions, but are just descriptors. Interestingly enough, one person who did respond to me told me that once he had a client tell him that the music needed to sound more red. And that was all the information he got. And I asked him how it worked out, and he said, I don't really remember, but I'm sure it worked out fine. So, I mean, that can work. Red is a valid descriptor. It's probably not the only word that you want to give your composer, but it's a valid, color gives us emotion too. So, but bear in mind, colors mean different things to different people, so, be honest, courteous, and detailed. Don't tell them you love a cue if you hate it. But you don't have to come out and say you hate it either. Think about the way you want to be spoken to about your game. You wouldn't want someone to come and tell you that your game is trash and you hate it and they should start over again. But you could tell them, I don't think this part's quite working yet, or this isn't giving me what I would need from it, or that is a little uncomfortable to listen to, or you can point out specific instruments that you don't like, but that's another thing to be kind of wary about, because it might not be the instrument that's bothering you, it might be something else. So don't just say you don't like it. That doesn't really help. Explain what you don't like. I don't like the way it gets faster at the end. I don't like the way it sounds really sad in the beginning, or it's too dark, or it's too red. But try to be a little more descriptive than that. Treat it like a conversation. Don't just give your feedback and walk away. Give the composer a chance to ask you what you need. Ask you what you need about this. Maybe make some suggestions, like, well, what if I took the oboe out and put some percussion in instead to give it more of a drive, or something like that, While I was working on that audio drama, at one point, the music I had written for the villain of the story, I used an oboe as that villain's instrument, because I was thinking about those characters in that time, and they didn't care for the oboe because it sounded too cartoony, and they suggested baritone bassoon, which wasn't going to work because they also wanted taiko, and it was way too low, and it's going to get muddy, and you're not going to be able to hear what you want to hear. So I told them that I couldn't give them what they were asking for, and they were receptive to that. They didn't go, well, no, that's what we want. Listen to your composer. Don't let them boss you around. Of course, it's your game, you're paying them, but listen to them, talk to them about it, make it a dialogue, give them a chance to give you some suggestions or ask you for some suggestions, and let it be a fun little conversation. And I had some examples. So The two examples I have, one is from Brass. So there's a place in this audio drama called the Blackfire Club, and it's this really high-end casino where all the bad guys hang out. So these were some of the snippets of what I got about this. It's the music being played at the Blackfire Club. It's supposed to be like a night out of town, high-class vice. So my first attempt, and I already kind of knew this wasn't right. I don't know if we click the Blackfire Club. This is my first go at it. Let's do this little thing here. So I'm thinking of, kind of pianists sitting in the background playing while everyone's gambling and having fun. The problem is that it's really jazzy, and this story takes place in 1885, and we weren't really in the jazz age yet. So I got the feedback that it was too jazzy, and I said, well, what do you think a nightclub would be playing at that time? So we had a really wonderful conversation about ragtime music, and how that was becoming a big thing, and how it was coming from America and being brought back, because the story takes place in Britain. It's being brought back to England, and how that's probably what they're listening about. So we talked a lot about ragtime music, and came up with our second version here, which is what they ended up going with. This is in the audio drama. Which is not what I would have gone for initially, because it doesn't scream high-class vice to me. But that's a good time period. So there's that example. We were all listening to it a little bit, or should we?
Listen to that too. Oh, sorry.
Okay, we'll leave that one for now. So that's an example of a good feedback loop. That was an example of some good feedback that gave me what I needed to give them what they needed, and they were very happy with it. Another example here is actually a piece that I wrote for the Mohonasen High School Orchestra. And the way that I approached this piece, I wanted to make sure that it was specific to the orchestra. So even though there's no image or story that goes with this is not like they gave me a game and told me to write music for it. It was an interesting challenge because when I went in, I sat down with the orchestra for about 45 minutes and I just talked to like these 50 kids about the kind of stories that they're interested in, the kind of music they listen to, and so on and so forth. And the funny thing is, even though I graduated from high school like a decade ago, they're still kids. They still do the same stuff. They still watch Star Wars. They still read Lord of the Rings. They still like Harry Potter and classic rock and all the same stuff that I like. So that was kind of cool to find out. But I jotted down all of these notes, things that they liked: rap, hip hop, fantasy, Greek myth, adventure, Batman, Lord of the Rings, Star Wars, AC/DC, fugues, marches. Those are musical terms. Fast-paced beats, key signature changes, accidentals, retro sound and stuff. I got all that stuff, and then I asked them to give me a bunch of descriptive words. And they gave me ambition, post-apocalypse, horror, elvish, mischievous, sad, romantic, sweet, nostalgic, lethargic, bubble, ambition, lit, hype, and ridiculous. And I took those 15 words, and I wrote a piece based on those 15 words. So, and it was only 5 minutes long. Actually, it was a little bit under 5 minutes. So we can listen to a little bit of this. Oh.
The mouse keeps disappearing. I'm sorry.
This is just a demo. Unfortunately, I don't have the recording back yet. They performed this a couple weeks ago. So I'll kind of talk over it as it's playing. So I wrote a story that fit all of these things that they've given me. And I decided to set it in a post-apocalyptic wasteland. And we have 3 characters traveling together. We have Janae, who's a young woman, probably early to mid-20s, and she's got these 2 younger children with her. She's got this 12-year-old boy, Yukio, and an 8-year-old girl, Aaliyah. And they're traveling through the desert. I don't know why. I didn't think that far ahead. But they're traveling through the desert, and it's taking a really long time, and it's really boring. There's nothing going on. They have to keep stopping at night to rest. So to keep themselves entertained, they tell each other campfire stories, and each character has a very different story. it's got that ambition, post-apocalyptic, horror, elvish mischievous. And this is the March and Fugue section. So she's kind of scaring these little kids, telling this ghost story type thing. This, I think of the battle of the ring-race. Each section is only like 30 seconds long. And then to keep it connected, I bring back that intro that we had, that sort of pizzicato thing. That's our post-apocalyptic wasteland where the wind's kind of blowing and the tumbleweeds are floating around. Oh, sorry. So this is Yukio's story, and it's a sad, tragic, romantic myth that he's telling. I don't know many 12-year-old boys that are into sad romantic myths, but for the sake of this, he's into sad romantic tragedies. So and the last section is Aaliyah's story, and she's an 8-year-old girl. So I thought, what sort of a story would an 8-year-old girl tell? She had to make one off the top of her head. So she tells a story about superhero princesses. You know, flying around downtown, saving the day, doing all that good stuff. So this is our ridiculous section here. Follow ambition, lit, It's hard to hear because the bass is kind of cutting out here. You can't really hear the bass on these speakers, but there's a little bit of like a hip hop beat going on underneath that. You can either listen to the rest of this or we can, it's almost over, but it's just going to go back to the, it's like 10 seconds left. I guess this would be them sighting their destination off in the distance, and they're getting there. So you get this big swell. Alright, so that was that piece, which I thought showed the power of words, because they didn't give me any images, they didn't give me any stories, they just gave me these words. And I had one more example, but I think it might be kind of hard to demonstrate because I linked to the website here. So this is a game that is currently in development that I am not the composer for, but I did a demo for them. I didn't end up getting it done in time, they already chose a different composer. But I really, really wanted to talk about this game because they have a website with a blog and tons of art, and tons of lore, and tons of stuff available for just anyone to go see. So I was able to get a lot of backstory before I started writing a demo for them. And when they put out a call for a composer, they gave a bunch of reference tracks, and they did an excellent job of describing what it was they liked about these reference tracks. They didn't just say, I just like it, you know, or something. They didn't try to talk about things they didn't understand. They didn't be really vague about it. They gave a really good example. And so I might see if I can I run back there and see if I can get that website open? And can I navigate to the blog there? I didn't go straight to the post because I wanted you guys to see some of the stuff, get a sense of what their website looks like and everything like that. This looks really, really cool. So you can see they've got all this art. If you go to the blog, you have to go back a ways to find the one about when they were looking for a composer, because they were looking for a composer like 3 or 4 years ago. It should be, it's probably back further. It'll be the main character here sitting near a gramophone. Will be the image. There it is. Yep. Right there. We scroll down a bit. Keep going a little more. See, here we go. Now ultimately they ended up going with smooth jazz, which is interesting to me because that's nothing like what they had listed here. But music style, mixture of orchestrated cello, violin, oboe, flute, with modern touches of light trip-hop beats and jazz influences throughout. Music will match the moody, heavier themes of a strategy game based around medieval warfare, love, and betrayal, while still maintaining a sense of adventure and thirst for exploration within the exotic lands of Arcadia. Then, they gave a bunch of tracks here, which I was able to go listen to and get a sense of, I was able to do a directed listening and hear what they liked about it. But in Overall Black Sands, we like pretty much everything about the song, kind of overall captures the sort of feel we're going for. We like the many sections and layers with instrument choices that seem to transport you to a faraway land. That gives me a lot to work with as a composer. We like the movie oboe here, as well as many layers to the piece. Characters in Arcadian Atlas are all multidimensional with virtues and vices, so we gravitate towards orchestrations that match that complexity. The song captures a type of trip-hop, jazzy beats we are seeking to help keep the flow of the OST catchy and highly listenable. We tend to listen to our favorite video game OSTs long after we've completed the actual game, so we're aiming for the same quality in our game soundtrack. And then the variety and layering of exotic instruments develops a sense of wonder and both here what we're after. Arcadian Atlas's landscapes and architecture are heavily inspired by French, Spanish, Italian, Irish, and Icelandic styles, so open to many instruments and musical styles to give a taste of those types of locations within the game. So, they give a ton of detail. They're also asking for a lot. That is a lot to ask for. That's a lot of different things that you want. You want orchestra, you want jazz, you want trip hop, you want exotic instruments, you want layers, you want all of that in one, which is totally doable. But I'm sure they're paying their composer a lot of money for that. So if you'd like to, if you can go back to the presentation, which is going to take you to SoundCloud, because I didn't have this one available in MP3 form on my laptop. You can listen to it. This is how I interpreted that. And they've never heard this, I don't think. There's my face. So again, I had no feedback from them. I never even showed this to them. So it's up to you to decide whether I met those descriptions accurately or not. I actually met someone who knows the creators of that game, and I said, well, if it comes up in conversation, sure, it's going to involve me. But I don't think that's happened yet. Hard to hear here, but there's this Caribbean steel drum and an African kalimba in there to give that sort of exotic feel. With the oboe and flute. is awesome, by the way. Envision that you might empower. It's about revolution, and it's sort of not like a dating sim, but sort of like a visual novel that you're trying to move your way up in the aristocracy without losing your head. And the music's incredible. The composer for that game, awesome guy. He plays like every brass instrument ever, so every instrument is tracked. It's really cool. That's it. So I want to open it for questions, and if you guys are interested enough, I have a little bit of an interactive thing planned where you can throw words at me, and I would tell you how I might interpret them musically, but that's up to you guys. So are there questions? I wasn't sure exactly what people might want out of this presentation, so I wanted to leave lots of time for questions.
They said like don't use musical terms, but what about instruments? Like
You could absolutely use instruments, but again, bringing it back to that example that I gave from brass, bear in mind that be open, be flexible about it. So like for example, they had already told me well in advance they wanted taiko for that theme. Taiko are very low and very muddy, and you're going to want to keep any of your other main melody instruments out of that range, or they're going to get buried, and you're not going to hear anything. So if you were to say, oh, I really want my piece to be like violin and piccolo and flute and glockenspiel, those are all very high-range instruments. So you're going to be missing all of the low. You know what I'm saying? So you can absolutely say, I really like oboe, use an oboe. And let the composer work out on that. But you want to be careful not to get too boxed in, if you know what I'm saying.
right.
Does that make sense? So like when they gave me the suggestion of like the baritone bassoon, that wasn't going to work with the taiko, it was going to have to be one or the other. And actually that instrument, the baritone bassoon, because it's lower than a regular bassoon, doesn't really work as a melodic instrument unless it's solo. Because it's so low and muddy, anything that you put around it, your ear is automatically going to go to whatever the other thing is. So that's just something to keep in mind as well. You can absolutely make suggestions or say, I want it to be orchestra, or I want it to be like a rock band, or I want it to have electric guitar, whatever you want. But just keep in mind, try not to get too attached and be prepared to compromise on other aspects of the music just because they're not going to work. Does that answer your question? Cool.
As a programmer, a lot of the limitations behind trying to work with composers is, let's say, for example, you want to put together interactive music. It's not what's the adaptive music?
Yeah.
Adaptive music, your game, for example, and like the technology isn't quite there or something like that. So in a situation where things are technologically more complex than just play this looping music, what is the best advice you have for having a back and forth with a musician, making sure that they get, they can at least kind of have like a quicker, easier understanding of how the music system in the game is currently implemented, and trying to work together on coming up with something closer to the end result that you're looking for.
Get one who knows middleware, or one who's willing to learn middleware, WISE or FMOD. So there are middleware engines that are designed to do that, and most game composers will know how to use them, and in a lot of cases, on the indie level, the person writing the music and creating the sound probably will be the one implementing it too, but not always. So in that scenario, they would probably have a decent idea of what you want, even if you're not using middleware, but they'll have a basic understanding of how it works. If you're working with someone who doesn't know any of that, tell them to go get WISE or FMOD, they're both free, and they come with lots of tutorials that are easy to learn. There's some really cool stuff that you can do. That would be my suggestion there for when you want interactive or adaptive music. Anything else? Did that answer the question sufficiently?
Yes.
Cool. Do you have any other questions? No? Does anyone want to throw words at me and see how they might be interpreted musically? Unfortunately, I don't have my studio with me, so I'm not actually going to play music. I'm just going to describe music to you.
Katamari.
Katamari? Well, see, that's not fair because I already played Katamari, so I don't know.
say natural, technological, local, mystical, and sci-fi.
Okay, so you want a blend of magical, technological, mystical, and sci-fi. So when you say mystical, I'm thinking things like harp and mandolin and some string instruments, not your typical orchestral string instruments, but maybe a little bit more off the beaten track string instruments. That's going to give you your mystical. Technological and sci-fi, I'm going to add some synths in there, and probably a pretty strong beat. And natural, I'm going to want to make sure I have a good blend of acoustic instruments in there too. So I'll probably include some woodwinds. And actually some woodwinds, like a pan flute or something, would also add to that mystical aspect. So you're probably gonna open up with some flutes and strings, just sort of give you that, bring you right into that like elvish woodland region, and then pump it up with a beat and some synths, and it's just sort of that's how I would approach it, with just those 4 words. Do you want more descriptive than that?
Well, eventually.
Well, yeah, you want to hear it, hopefully, but
Do you think instrument first and then move on to what else the notes?
so it kind of depends. It depends on how much information I have and what approach the client wants to take. So, for example, with brass, that I went very character focused. So what I did for that is I wrote themes for each of the characters, and I believe the themes came first. And I did that intentionally. I wrote a main theme for the family, and then I wrote character themes that can sandwich with that. So any of the character themes, you can take them and play them at the same time, and they'll more or less work together. So that if I have a scene with 2 of the characters arguing or chatting or whatever, I can blend those 2 themes together, and you would get a sense of continuity of who the characters were. But after I had those themes, I then assigned them instruments. So the patriarch of the family, Lord Brass, who is an inventor and scientist, they're all G. So the whole deal with Brass is that it takes place in 1885 in steampunk England, so like an alternate universe. And the family, it's a family of 4, and they serve the queen. They're all geniuses, and they all fight crime for the queen. So it's this really cool steampunk detective story. And the father is an inventor and scientist, and so he's represented by a trombone because brass, right? The family name is Brass. So he's the trombone. His wife, Lady Brass, is a clarinet because he's very calculating and precise and delicate and feminine. She's a detective. She's like a Sherlock Holmes level detective. Their daughter, Gwendolyn, is a master of disguise and an acrobat, so she's a flute. And their son, Cyril, is he's a master of combat and weapons, but he's also super into fashion. So I wanted to keep his instrument kind of classy and stuff like that, so he's a bassoon. So it sort of depends. In other scenarios, sometimes your instrumentation is going to be limited, like with the Mahana Symphony Orchestra. I already knew what my instruments were going to be. They were going to be string orchestra. I couldn't add anything to it unless I wanted to make it an electroacoustic piece, which I didn't want to take that chance with the high school orchestra. So I couldn't use instruments to represent the characters. So instead, I chose to represent them by the types of stories that they were telling, and use other musical elements like tempo and time signature, the mode that it was written in, to sort of represent those different elements. So it doesn't always start with an instrument. Sometimes it does, but it depends on the situation. Usually I start with either a theme or a chord progression and work from there. Depends on the type of music too.
How does one go about asking a composer to integrate sound effects? So, for example, what if I ask you, I want you to make music where there's a solo melody of just car horns? Do I have to hire a sound designer to grab a car horn sound effect for you or something like that?
No, there's plenty of free sound effects available. So, and I could go record my own. So I also do sound design, so you're covered there. And actually, I'd venture to say most indie level composers are also sound designers, or at least have some experience with it, because often, again, it's the same way that they're going to implement their music, it's because you don't want to hire 18 people to do this job, right? If you're at indie level, you don't have infinite funds, so you're going to find someone who can do everything So in that scenario, if you wanted something composed entirely of car horns, you would tell your composer that, and it's up to them at that point. You know, they either tell you they can't do it or they got to figure it out. And the other thing too, media composers are, I have a master's degree in composition, specifically focused on scoring for media, and you have to be a chameleon. You can't just write one thing. So they're very well versed. Media composers are very well versed in doing things out of the box and researching and figuring out how to do new things. So you can kind of throw anything at them, they'll figure it out. If they can't figure it out, they'll tell you and hire someone else. Anything else? Maybe you want to throw more words at me, or should we wrap it up? Up to you. Good. Good. Thanks for that. All right, thank you for having me.